Why does it seem like it's so hard to stay consistent with God? It's like you get on fire for God for a season. You get motivated to read your word and spend time with God, but it's so hard to stay on fire for God. Meaning 6 months down the line, a year down the line, you're still going the same amount you're still putting the same amount of effort you did when you first got saved. Why is that so hard? It's because we start to forget how much we need God. It's because we forget how great God really is. Because the second you stop realizing how much someone means to you or something needs to you, that's when you start to take advantage of it. Why do you think relationships start off so well, start off so good, but then years down the line, there's more arguing, there's not much fire? It's because the other person starts to take advantage of what they have. They forget how good that other person is to them in their life. And so we do the same thing with God. Us as humans do the same thing. We have to realize our need for God. And if you don't realize your need for God, then you'll continue to fall back into the same temptation. You'll continue to keep going back to the same temptation. You won't get sanctified and you'll be in the same spot in your walk with Christ. You'll keep going back to the world. You'll keep not reading your word. You'll keep scrolling and not be focused in your word instead of actually spending time with God. And then you'll never be able to grow. And so that's why in this video, I'll actually be talking about the 5 ways that you can actually stay consistent in your walk with Christ so that you don't keep going back to temptations and you can really stay on fire for God. And the first way to stay consistent in this walk with Christ is by fulfilling God's will and walking in God's will. Because if you walk in God's will for your life, that is how you stay consistent. That is where you get your motivation from. That is where you get your drive from. Because the reason why people go so hard in business, the reason why people go so hard in workforce is because they're working towards something. Well, the second you stop working towards something in this walk with Christ is the second you're going to stop relying on God. And when you stop relying on God, that's when you start to indulge in the flesh more, meaning scrolling on social media. You start with the little things first. You start indulging in too much social media. You start playing video games. You start doing things that seem harmless, but they are actually feeding your flesh. And then once you start feeding your flesh too much, that's when you start giving into temptation, forgetting about the word, start getting distracted in the word. So even if you do pick up your word, you can't even focus. And then that's when you slowly start to fall away from God. And then you wonder, why am I not having this same fire for God? Why can't I worship and feel God's presence anymore? Why can't I win this spiritual battle that I'm in? It's because you're not preparing right and you're not walking in the will that God has for you. So make sure that you're figuring out what God has for you. Figure out what his will is for your life. And then that's when you'll be able to overcome these temptations that the enemy is throwing your way. And Jesus even says in John chapter 4, verse 34, he says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. And the reason why Jesus says his food is to do God's will is because his will is what strengthens him. It's what keeps him going. Just like food gives us the nourishment, the energy that we need to go and fulfill whatever we need, our earthly duties. Well, essentially, that's our spiritual food. That's how we continue to grow in Christ. That's how we continue to get motivated to read the word, to spend time with God, to rely on God and praise God and fast and different stuff like that. That is why God says we need to not rely on just physical food, but also our spiritual food. So make sure that you are focused on your will, focus on your purpose, because that's what's going to keep you going. The second way to stay consistent in your walk with Christ is counting your blessings. Realize how much God is blessing you, because the second you start to get ungrateful, the second you think that you're working for no reason, that is the second you'll start giving up on God. And so if you start having this mindset of, why am I even reading the word? Why am I praying? Why am I doing what I am doing? Then that's when you'll start to stray away from God. So you need to know your reason why you are reading your word, why it's important, because that's the reason why, teenagers, even me personally, the reason why I stopped reading the word, the reason why I stopped going to church, the reason why I stopped spending time with God and stopped even seeking God when I was, 13 in high school is because I didn't feel like it was necessary. I didn't feel like I really needed it. But once I figured out that I really needed Christ, how important it is to spend time with God each and every day and to mature, that is when I started to take my walk with Christ seriously. And so you need to keep that purpose in the back of your mind. You need to keep that. You need to know your why, the why you are spending time with God, why God is so important in your life. And then that's what's going to keep you going. The third way to stay consistent in your walk with Christ is having a godly community. You don't understand how important it is to have a godly community, because just like me, one of the reasons why I am so consistent in my walk with Christ, the reason why I'm so consistent with reading my word is because, one, yes, I know that I'll end up falling back into temptation, but I also have people holding me accountable. I also don't want to be a hypocrite to the people I'm around, and even a hypocrite to the people I'm spreading the gospel to. Like, yo, so I have to be a living example. And so you must have that kind of pressure on yourself to live that way too. And the way you can do that, you may not have a ministry, you might not be over a church, but it's important that you have friends that you are around so that they can judge you righteously, so that they can get you back in check if you are, falling into temptation, if you are struggling to read the word or whatnot. And that's also why it's important that you minister to other people, whether that be a little brother, whether that be, friends, whoever it is. You must have your own ministry. You don't have to have this huge following to have a ministry. You can minister to, someone that you are just close with. And that's one of the most important things we must do in this walk with Christ. Help people in their journey, because someone helped you. And so we're supposed to be the light in this world, not the light to the light, but the light to the darkness. And so we must shine that light on other people and bring them closer to God. And so that's why it's important that you find someone like a godly community, and also find someone that you minister, because you want to be that example. You want something that will motivate you and strive you to continue to grow in the word. Because if you're ministering to someone, that should be your motivation. That should keep you reading your word each and every day, so that you know what you're talking about and you can help them more. So it's important that we are moving in our purpose, walking in our will, because if we're not, that's when the enemy will tempt you. And that actually brings me to step number 4, which is you can't be idle. You can't just be sitting and doing nothing with your time. If you are not doing anything, even if it's literally simply just reading the word, if you are reading the word and yet you're not applying it to your life in any way, shape, or form, you're going to get burnt out. You're going to get worn out. Yes, it's okay to study for a while. It's okay to go on a journey where you're just studying. But if you are not applying that to your life, if you are not growing in the fruits of the Spirit, and you are not going around people and using the gifts and talents that God has given you, then of course you're going to end up going back in temptation. You're going to get bored of the word. And so this walk with Christ is not supposed to be boring. We're not supposed to be bored at all, because if we are bored, then the enemy will tempt us more with slothfulness. He will tempt us with gluttony. He will tempt us with lustful thoughts, because we are bored and we want to get enticed, because our flesh is becoming stronger if we are not using or fulfilling God's will. And so we need to be doing something with our time each and every single day. Do not be idle, because the second you're idle is when the enemy will attack you. So make sure that you are not only spending time with God, but actually applying it to your life, because that's how you're going to continue to stay consistent in this walk with Christ. Number 5, the last way is obviously a prayer life. You need to have a strong prayer life in this walk with Christ, because if not, the enemy is going to attack you and it cause you to go back to your old ways. You have to realize if you are reading your word and you are tired, you are not able to focus on the things around you, you need to pray, because that may be a spirit. Anything that is causing you to, not spend time with God or not feed your spirit, that is your flesh rising up, and it could be the enemy working in your life. And so if you feel like every single time you read your word, you're falling asleep, then you need to pray against that, and you need to fight through that so that the enemy will flee, because the word says resist the devil and submit to God and he will flee from you. So you need to resist that tiredness, submit to God, and then that's when the enemy will flee from you and you'll be able to read that word easily. But many of the times we don't resist. That's why we struggle sometimes with lust. That's why we struggle reading our word, is because we don't resist. It's a 2-part thing. We need to submit to God with our faith, and then we need to resist. But a lot of us don't resist, and that's why the enemy is not fleeing in our life. So you need to resist the enemy and then submit to God in prayer, faith, whatever you need to do. And then that's when the enemy will flee. But you need to make sure that you have a strong prayer life. And if you have trouble praying, you can look at the Lord's Prayer for examples, and you can also read Psalms. Psalms is a good way to pray. But praying is pouring out your heart. So if you are struggling with something, pour out your heart to God and just speak from the heart, because we are all going through something. And so it should be easy to pray. It should be easy to talk to God, because he's the one that's going to give us strength to solve our problems. So make sure you have a strong prayer life, that you have a prayer list, and that you're moving in faith, because if you're not moving in faith, then that's when the enemy will be able to get you. So these are the 5 ways that you are able to Stay consistent in your walk with Christ. I hope this video edifies you. I hope you can apply these 5 things to your life, because once you catch these revelations, once you use these in your everyday walk with Christ, it can be a year, 10 years, 20 years, no matter how long you are in your walk with Christ, you will stay consistent and you're going to be able to endure to the end. So make sure you're staying consistent in walk with Christ. Make sure you apply these 5 things to your life so that you are able to stay on fire for God. So appreciate y'all for watching. I appreciate all the support. But until next time, as usual, y'all stay blessed.